Welcome to The Ripple, where extraordinary women executives share their turning points, growing pains, breakthroughs, and triumphs to help you show up with confidence. I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, and today we're joined by the enthusiastic Kristi Faltorusso. She's ranked 4 times as one of the top 25 customer success influencers. She's also Chief Customer Officer at ClientSuccess and host of the She's So Sweet podcast. Today, she joins us to talk about how giving selflessly changed her career. Kristi, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. What an excellent mission, and I'm so excited to be part of the conversation.
You're going to be a role model for so many of our listeners, especially with the mission that you told me about. But before we get into that, I want to hear a little bit about what you love about the work that you're doing now.
I started my career in customer success back in 2012 after a decade in marketing, where at one point I swore I'd be a CMO or a chief digital officer at some point, and decided to make a big pivot and have spent the past 12 years in customer success helping organizations build, scale, and transform what their post-sales organizations look like, and have really just kind of found a pathway to sharing all of my learnings and experiences back with the community, and have had the blessing of being able to join a company like ClientSuccess, which is customer success software for the customer success community. So it's very meta in the sense that I found a way to foster a career around the thing that drove me the most, which was sharing back to the customer success community.
Why was that such a driver for you?
I spent the early part of my career in customer success really struggling. Like I said, I pivoted from marketing, and so I didn't have any traditional customer success experience before my first job. And, transparently, I didn't know what SaaS was. I didn't know anything about the tech world. And so
You're
I
really
joined
coming in cold.
Right. Like I was like, "Oh, what does CSM stand for?" It was really difficult for me early on, and I struggled with imposter syndrome. Like I cannot explain. I know a lot of people talk about it. It was such a real thing for me, and, contributed to a lot of struggle and heartache and, floundering and failing very miserably at times. And I really wanted to make sure that other leaders that were in this space didn't have that same experience, that they could have success without all of the struggle that I had to navigate.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. What have you noticed since you became the person in your community who was sharing so selflessly and so often and so much?
I think the big thing that I've seen, at least, or that I read, is the impact that I get to make on others. This community is really special. I mean, customer success, and like I said, I've worked in marketing. It's really unlike other disciplines in the sense that this community really does rally around one another. And, I grew up in a time in my career where, there weren't a ton of women executives, and there wasn't this idea of sharing, right? Because everyone was almost gatekeeping all of their learnings, because if they shared it and they gave away their secret sauce, maybe it would introduce new competition, or it would prevent them from getting that next opportunity. And so I was raised in that culture professionally. And so this idea of giving people all of my IP and sharing this was like so foreign and really uncomfortable initially. But what I have found is that so many people have been able to be successful and have advanced in their careers because of the work that I've shared out there. And so, I don't get to see or hear it every day, but I know it's happening. And then the people that reach out to me with their stories, it moves me incredibly.
I think that's such a relatable thing, especially in the world of social media and B2B social media, where a lot of people are selling their expertise. And so to give it away feels really uncomfortable, not only because it makes you feel like, oh, well, what do I have left to give? Right? If I just tell you everything, if you just read all of my LinkedIn posts in succession, there's nothing left for you to know. There's no secret. What do you say to people who feel like that?
I did struggle with that idea initially, because it was like, well, if I'm just giving all of this away and I'm sharing all of these things, what makes me unique? What makes me special? Because I don't have those things exclusive to me any longer. And what I've actually found is that the selfless giving has actually amplified my brand, and people seek me out as a thought leader and somebody that they can go to for advice and guidance and coaching. So it's actually had the reverse effect that I thought it would have, where it's actually given me more opportunities and expanded my brand and profile in ways that I could have only imagined.
I have to ask you, as somebody who also is, in this content creation world, are you ever worried when someone comes to you for advice and you're like, I'm about to tell them something that I just wrote a post about or that I just wrote an article about, and I kind of hope they didn't read it? because I'll just be repeating myself. Does that ever
No,
happen to
I
you?
mean, honestly, you know what happens in these private dialogues that I get the privilege of having is that we're having a conversation that's around some specificity, right? Like, it includes some details about what they're actually navigating. Most of my content is generally applicable, but once you hear what somebody's really navigating, you're able to offer different insights and different kind of points of view specific to what it is that they need. So the resources I have out there are great, they're helpful, and I think a lot of people take a lot from them. But when you have those one-on-one dialogues, it's okay for me to be like, "Yes, I have something I just put out there, but there's also something else I can offer because now that you're sharing more with me, I can share more with you."
That makes so much sense, and it's that personal connection, it's the context, the relationship, the
Yeah.
understanding that adds so much color to it is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, I say this all the time. My answer often to everything in customer success and almost business in general is it depends, right? There's so many nuances in every situation that there isn't a one size fits all approach. There's not even a one size fits most. It is really unique to every business and industry and every leader and all of the nuances that go into it. And so learning more about what people are trying to navigate in their own businesses or in their own careers allows me an opportunity to think differently about what I might offer in terms of advice and guidance.
I think that is such a reassuring thought too, because when you think about over the course of your career and all this content that you create, there are probably plenty of times when you contradict yourself, and it's because it depends
Right.
on what the situation is. You're so right that there's never a one size fits all situation. And so it would be impossible to say, well, I've given you all the information.
Right. And it's, it's so interesting because some of the content that you'll see out there in social media, right? Because social media, I almost feel like is always clickbait anyway. Somebody just wants you to do something with what they're providing some early insights around. But it is always, it depends, right? Like, there's a big conversation in customer success around should CSMs own revenue or should they not? Well, I've worked in 5 different organizations, and in all 5 organizations, I've owned different amounts of it or different parts of it or not at all. And it was never right or wrong. It was what was appropriate in the organization that I was working in. And so that's just one example of like things aren't black and white. And so you've got to be able to like take all these things into consideration. And there are posts and content, especially as I look over the years, things I said 3 years ago, I definitely contradict today. But guess what? AI wasn't around then. This wasn't around then. Like we're in a different world, I mean, month to month. So there's always going to be this like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Or guess what? When I wrote something or I produced content, I didn't have this new experience that I have, or this new learning, or this new piece of data. And so I think there's always going to be room to evolve your thoughts. And at least if you're somebody who is always like an avid learner like myself, you should always be growing professionally and trying and thinking about new things.
I love that. And not only because you are open to change as it's happening,
Mhm.
but also because you see yourself as a learner and you're sharing your journey of learning all these things as they happen, right? And I think that there are so many people who we've talked about who feel nervous about sharing what they know, sharing too much and, hurting themselves in some way in the process. But I think there are just as many people out there who feel like I'm just learning, I don't know. It's what I think and what I know so far isn't valuable enough because I haven't reached this place or that thing. And I'm curious what you would say to those people who really struggle to feel confidence that what they know is valuable and that they should be sharing it.
Oh my gosh. I say this to people all the time. I'm like, listen, first of all, there's different fears that people have, right? Like it's the I'm not going to post on social media because I'm not willing to make myself feel that vulnerable by putting those things out there. And I tell those people, if you're not comfortable posting, go comment, right? You're going to have a perspective there and your insights are still valuable. If that's not the format for you, then go find a different avenue to share those things. But at the end of the day, you still have your experiences and those are real and true to you. And your experiences do bring insights and bring learnings that are valuable to other people that haven't had the same experiences. So you don't need to wait until you're at a certain title or you've had a certain amount of years. Every time I learn something new, I can share that, right? I got a 16-year-old kid. She learns something new every single day. Because she's young, does that make what she's learned not valuable? Not at all, right? Like that's her learning. And there's going to be somebody who's maybe not where she is in her journey. And the same thing is true for us as professionals. There's always going to be somebody who's not where you are. So don't think about it as they have to get to a certain place. We're all learning and growing together. And there's always new people entering our communities and our universes that aren't where we are. And share what you've learned, give back, and don't worry about what other people are going to think. I mean, listen, it's social media. Everyone's going to have an opinion, everyone's going to have a thought. That is the keyboard warrior mindset. Like, let people think and say. It doesn't take away though from what you've learned and your experiences, and they're valuable.
I totally agree with you. And something I really like about your point about your daughter and what she's learning still being valuable even though she's young. Sometimes we need to be reminded of those things that we've already learned and see it through the eyes of someone who's learning it for the first time and kind of have that concept feel fresh to us again
Yeah.
to do something new with it.
Absolutely. And listen, everybody's learning something for the first time at a different time, right? So when I started customer success 12 years ago, it looked very different than someone who's starting in customer success today, right? So them entering into this industry and having some of those experiences for the first time, they're going to have very different experiences doing very similar things. So I can't discredit what I've done because those were my experiences at that time, but they're having a different one right now and there is value in us learning from that. So I always say, like, at the end of the day, everyone's got something to contribute. And if all of us are just sharing all the time, we only learn and get better together.
Do you think that your industry is in particular kind of developing because of this kind of sharing, like it's changing so much and there's so much that's kind of not documented. You know, you described that part of your mission to share was because that was your experience. Do you think that is what's evolving your industry, or do you think that it's getting more solidified, more documented as you go?
It's getting a bit better, but customer success as it practices an industry is still far more immature than sales, than marketing, than finance, right? Like all those other disciplines that have been around for years and years and years, right? Customer success is still new, we'll say 20 years or so. And so that said, there is still so much that we're still all trying to figure out. So while there is more content now than there has ever been before, there are still huge gaps in really core areas around best practices and infrastructure and things that we should all be operating against.
Yeah, the reason I ask you about that is because I think so many leaders are feeling a sense of newness that they maybe haven't felt in a while as we're all kind of navigating the world of AI and just so many changes in the market, so much uncertainty and newness. What advice do you have for people sharing in the face of so much uncertainty and so much newness? How should they approach that?
I think folks should just be more open-minded in how they're positioning their thoughts and their learnings. Like I said, there are some folks that really do take a hard stance that this is right or this is right, and they stand firm on those things, right? There's always that, like, the hill I'm going to die on. And I feel like that is the most prohibiting thing that we can do in the content that we're sharing right now, is because it's going to evolve. Tomorrow it might look very different, right? If we took ChatGPT and AI away tomorrow, well, that leaves us in a very different spot. So I encourage folks to have a position, have a point of view, have a perspective on things, share the experiences that you've had, but also be very open-minded to that is not the only way. That might not be the best way for folks. And so just create content in a way that is inviting other points of views and other perspectives. Because what I find is that if you do have some, let's say, like thought leaders or influencers in the space that are taking a hard stance on things, it prevents other people from sharing if they don't share the same point of view, if they haven't had those same experiences. And I feel like that is what closes people off. So we want to create an environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing and that it's a safe space.
This is so relevant to our podcast, Wednesday Women. You know, the whole mission behind this is to elevate the voices of women leaders and just to have us be more of the conversation that's going on all around us. And I think a big part of that is seeing our voices as an asset and not a liability. And when things are changing so much, it's easy to feel like it's a liability or you're going to contradict yourself and someone's going to catch you. And you know, any number of things that kind of holds us back from speaking out. So I really appreciate all the advice that you've given all of us. I think it's deeply relevant, not only for this particular moment, but in a pretty evergreen way to just encourage all of us to be part of the conversation, help others, and share selflessly. So I just want to thank you for joining us and bringing that spark and joy into the idea of content creation.
Thank you so much. I like that's my mission, right? Is like let's continue to all keep sharing our experiences and our stories and not be afraid of them, but rather embrace them.
Absolutely. Well, I feel energized and ready to embrace my story and everything that I've learned today. I hope everyone listening feels the same way. And if you aren't following Kristi, you should definitely find her on LinkedIn. We'll have her information in the show notes. But again, thank you, Kristi, so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Before we end the episode, we want to take just a moment to reflect with you, our selfless listeners, about what Kristi's story means to you. How can your experience help others? And what's holding you back from sharing it? If today's show inspired you, tell us. Send an email or voice memo to hello@wednesdaywomen.org. Or keep the ripple going by giving us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your ratings help us grow and inspire even more people. This podcast is brought to you by Wednesday Women, an organization dedicated to increasing the visibility of women executive leaders. Learn more at wednesdaywomen.org. Thank you to our executive producers, Melissa Moody and Leslie Greenwood. Again, I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, hoping you'll keep the ripple going. Until next time.